Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Well, sister, how you doing? That's all I'm gonna say. How you doing, girl?
Doing well, doing well. We can keep it rolling.
We gonna keep it rolling. Show us your shirt, please. All right, her black job is voting, and that's what we gonna be talking about this evening. If you have not heard, I don't know where you have been, but one Mr. President Joseph Robinette Biden has said he is going to step down and has given his full support to the Vice President Kamala Harris. We are joined by two esteemed guests who are highly regarded, highly involved. Would you please introduce yourself? We're going to start with ladies first. Patrice, let us know. Tell us who you are and how you are uniquely qualified for this conversation this evening.
Well, good evening, sisters and gentlemen. My name is Patrice Marshall McKenzie. I am a very proud Californian, public servant, elected official, DNC delegate from the great state of California, and on the board of Ivy PAC, and passionate about all things related to coaching, preparing, supporting, and guiding Black women to elected leadership, be it at the elected or appointed level.
Fantastic. And what does your shirt say?
My shirt says Kamala.
All right.
Yeah.
And there you have it. All right. We got a Mr. with us this evening, and we've had him before. Mr., would you please introduce yourself and tell us why you're uniquely qualified to talk about this topic tonight?
My name is Attorney Kamara Williams. I am former proud resident of California, but I am now been here for a better part of 19 years, Florida. I have had different relationships throughout politics, most notably helping Black women get elected to seats that weren't really deigned for women or Black women. And so breaking some barriers there, continued to support Black women in the political space. And just really just an overall nosy person in politics. So I continue to have relationships with people, not just in Florida, but, try to have different parts of the country. And I will try not to mansplain to a group of intelligent Black women about politics who are more than uniquely qualified to discuss something. I'll just try to be participating in the conversation.
Awesome. And I love, what does your shirt say?
I didn't know we were like highlighting. This is a shirt I was using to cooking dinner in, but it just says,
but it fit.
Yeah, entrepreneur. Yeah. So.
And the largest growing demographic of entrepreneurs are who?
I would assume Black people. I'm not.
And specifically Black women.
Oh, see, it really okay. It all ties together. Okay, there it is. I do own my own business, and my law partner is a Black woman, proud AKA. So I do, obviously I support Black women both in my personal space, but also professionally as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's just dive in and let's talk about President Biden, this decision. And so we've been talking about this for a while, and for us, it was going to be, at least for me, I'm going to speak for myself, and sister, I'll have you speak for yourself. It was, let's all get behind, let's like have these oars hitting the water at the same time, and we're rowing in the same direction, and let's do this. Or you should have got out after 2 years so that she would have had 2 years of incumbency. We always assumed, let me speak for myself, I always assumed that we would get through this second election, he would win, and then within a year turn it over to her. I always thought that was the master plan. Maybe not. Y'all have more inside politics than I do. But today he decided to stand down. I thank him for his years of leadership. I think it is a true testament of a leader to make that choice to stand down. It's a little, I've been wrestling with a lot of things this morning, and I wrestled with why we had to wait till this point because the convention is in 3.5 minutes. But this is the point where we are. So I don't know, sister, what say you?
Yeah, I say that at the end of the day, there were many people who planned and voted for Joe Biden to be the nominee. And at the end of the day, I can only imagine that this was very tough for him. I mean, having a father in his 70s who I try to explain why, you shouldn't possibly do certain things at this age. It is a challenge. So I'm certain that him deciding not to continue was a tough decision for him, and probably took a lot of very smart people talking to him and explaining to him why he needed to step down. But like it just never felt from me like there was it just always felt like that it would just be difficult. It would be difficult if he stayed in. It would be difficult if he did exactly what he announced today, got out, and now it's like, well, who's the nominee? We're going into a convention without a nominee. And then it would be challenging had he stayed in, won, and then turned the reins over. So but he's throwing his weight behind Sister Kamala, and I'm gonna throw my weight behind her too. Not that I have any real weight.
All right. So we're gonna start with our mister this time. What are your thoughts?
First of all, I just want to make sure everybody's aware to mention Patrice is from the great state of California, former member of California, and Gavin Newsom just came out with a full-throated endorsement of Kamala Harris for president, which is pretty big, because we're talking about the musical chairs of who's going to be her on the ticket with her. So I guess we'll get that later on. Mm-hmm. I was first a little bit like, dang, we should probably rally behind Biden, because look who the Republicans, they always stay on message, stay on code, and they continue to, they will put out the worst candidate, hence Trump, and they will have a unified messaging. Mm-hmm. And then I've heard these statements now, like, we can't possibly have somebody in right now to go against Trump. Like, the Republicans are fully vested in Trump and they have messaging. We're going to have to start from behind. I really, especially within the last 48 hours, I have changed on my focus on whether or not it's going to matter to voters, as far as in a bad way. Former President Trump was, closely assassinated last week. Within 48 hours, do people even talk about that anymore? No. And so I say voters have the attention span of, they have the attention span of a goldfish. And so, and we even say this on local politics, you really want to make sure the last 3 weeks before the election that's when voters start really paying attention. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if would make a difference between okay, we'll hold on to Biden because we're so afraid of voters not showing up in November. We knew this was going to be a low turnout election anyway. This was not going to be, it is not going to be 2020 where everybody is going to be the most, participated election in U.S. history. I don't see that happening. There's a lot of different factors. And also, I think we're living in consequential times now. We're living in different times, and this is a consequential presidential nominee as far as in Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to do things differently. And so I don't see, if we're following the same format of how things always go and how things always have been, you may not follow about the same, you may not get the rubric you're thinking about, get the outcome you're thinking with following the same rubric. Mm-hmm. If you're going to challenge a unprecedented nominee in Donald Trump, who's literally been convicted of 37 counts on felony counts and has all this baggage and all this other stuff. And then so, I don't think you can go with just doing the conventional way. I think this almost seems on par on where we're at right now in politics, doing something that is so out of bounds that may actually, it's crazy enough to work, right?
Mhm.
And I truthfully, I look at how like Democrats are looking at this ticket, and there is a new energy. You can see the energy even just pouring in. People who were like, I wasn't really paying attention because it was two old white guys. Now this changes the entire dynamic and aesthetic of the election, just with how they attack Donald Trump. And there are rumors now. I don't know if this is true that Donald Trump is not going to get on the debate stage with Kamala because he's going to try to attack her as being the illegitimate candidate, which I really don't think that'd be the smartest thing for him to do, to tag her as an illegitimate candidate, because that can actually work. Boomer, a smart politico can flip that on you as well.
Mhm.
You're the illegitimate candidate because you
Right.
shouldn't even be on the stage based on your many convictions, right?
That's right.
But I just feel like that if there's going to be someone who can prosecute the case against having a second Trump presidency, why not have
A prosecutor.
former prosecutor? So
Yeah. All right. We have another Mister who's joining us, and I'm gonna have you chime in on this comment, Patrice. But our good friend Donald Naylor, who is from Houston, Texas, because we want him to talk about chime in specifically. He's in a red state. I'm in a red state. My sister's in a red state. Patrice, you the only one holding it down for a blue state. So.
It's purple.
Oh, your state's Arizona's purple? Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll leave it at that. But
Yeah.
right now, we're just talking about President Joe Biden, this decision, and the news of the day. So, and one of the things that I saw just breaking was that in 5 hours, they've raised $30 million since the announcement has been made. So,
Okay.
Patrice, what say you about the president?
So I have been on a roller coaster of emotions for the last probably 3 weeks. Ever since this conversation started in earnest, I was like, this is probably not a good idea. We're 105 days from election day. You want to start changing nominees. You've got deadlines around ballots. You've got deadlines around being able to certify candidates. You've got deadlines around being able to start early voting as early in September in some states. This opens the door for legal challenges. We already see we have a hostile Supreme Court. So if any of these legal challenges have to go to the Supreme Court, that is not on our side. So my unreadiness went there immediately in terms of kind of like the practical, pragmatic side of what if. Mm-hmm. Now, full disclosure, I was in 2020, I was a Kamala supporter. So the shift of events definitely sort of sparks joy in me from that standpoint, mm-hmm. of being able to actually see her be able to go the distance this time, unless there is the nefarious kind of, underbelly chatter that I am hearing that folks are trying to figure out how to still have her be at the top of the ticket, because whiteness remains undefeated. But I do think that there's enough momentum that
Except in the Olympics, but we'll let that slide. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. There is enough momentum that is shifting positively in her direction. It's going to be very difficult to try and do something other than what people are already seeing and responding to very, very positively and very, very favorably to. And to your point, Demetria, that the dollars are also speaking very loudly about how they feel with the change in direction. Speaking of donors, the quote donor class that has said that they're withholding their dollars, et cetera, none of them have enough money, or none of them are willing to put up enough money, let me say, to match or exceed the dollars that have already been raised by the Biden-Harris ticket. The dollars raised by the Biden-Harris ticket have to stay with either Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. So whoever this mythical person is, this mythical ticket is going to come in, 100 now in 3 days from election day, and raise hundreds of millions of dollars and be able to be competitive in all 50 states. Good luck to you. As someone who has run a campaign, even as a local campaign, Being able to stand up a campaign apparatus and raise money, get your message out, and do all those things in a short period of time is no easy feat. Doing it in 50 states in 100 days, virtually impossible. Well, it is impossible. So I think people realize that, one, as a candidate, she is exciting the base. Two, as a candidate, you follow the money and the money will follow her. And three, to Kamara's point, if there's somebody who's going to be able to prosecute the case about what peril we will be in should we find ourselves embarking on another Trump presidency, it is none other than Kamala Debbie Harris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and what's also interesting, and I'm coming back to you. What's also interesting is, the attacks, some of the attacks they had on her the first time about her ethnicity will be neutralized because one J.D. Vance's wife is also of Southeast Asian descent, and that's going to be because again they're already cannibalizing on the inside for that, because as you said, whiteness tries to remain undefeated, but it doesn't always work that way. But that also is going to be interesting.
Same with the whole conversation about her being DA and how, or AG, and how she just put all the Black people in jail, obviously. I saw it even today after somebody, mentioned their support. That's the first thing. Well, what about her record on crime? And I feel like that's neutralized as well, because the Republican Party claims to be the party of law and order. They claim to be tough on crime. They suggested that Joe Biden was not. So I don't see how that continues to be a conversation. The unfortunate piece is I still see it as a part of a talking point amongst Black men specifically.
Mm-hmm. We can get in a second. I want to piggyback on what Patrice said, something that was very interesting to me. Said to me several weeks ago, we were just talking about Kamala Harris potentially being nominee, and the person I spoke with who works very closely in that space, don't want to give out, but they said, Kamara, why it's always going to be Kamala, why it has to be Kamala at the time. They said, because to Patrice's point, Biden and Vice President Kamala have a war chest of $200 to $250 million, and I don't know who is going to be able to catch up to that. Right now, they have $200 to $250 million outlined to already raise. They have fundraised, and so
plus 30 million today.
Plus another 30 million. So it was like, the idea that somebody was going to just come out and raise, to your point now, almost $300 million, and create an apparatus to challenge her for that spot, or even at the time Biden was like, it's just unfounded. So that person's point is that I know all these people want to put in their bid, but the money, the money follows, the money flows, and with California actually being the biggest fundraise next to New York for the Democratic Party, they're absolutely going to go behind, a child of California, right? You know what I'm saying? One of their own, and the money's going to flow with her. So money talks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donald Naylor, we want to welcome you to the conversation. We got two lawyers on with us tonight. Child, what?
My.
But you are, you are our good brother over there. And first of all, I know Beryl messed y'all up and for a minute, and so
to say the least.
A little bit about Democratic politics in these red states. So you're in a red state, in Texas, in Houston specifically, and we just had the loss of our dear soror Sheila Jackson. And she has also had a very strong record in being a voice, being an advocate for the community, and fighting the good fight in situation and circumstance that would definitely a state that's not always in in her favor, but she did a remarkable job. And so I wanted you to comment on that loss, because as we've talked about here on Hey Sister, there, I think it's what, 432 congressional seats that are going to be on ballots around these 52 around these 50 states, as well as 33 Senate seats. I might have my numbers wrong tonight because we've been talking about it for a while. But with her transition, um, and who holds the governorship and what that process might look like, um, what happens to the city that you live in and the representation in that city that you live in? So I know I'm throwing a whole lot at you on that, but you can bucket it in, her personally, and then what that means for y'all state.
Well, hope you can hear me, and good evening to everyone. Glad to be part of the conversation. Thank you for sending me the note to get on in the midst of all of it. I'm still catching up. My head is on swivel, as I'm sure the rest of the the country is. Speaking to the Congresswoman, how she's referred to here in Houston, and we have at least three. But when you say the Congresswoman in Metro Houston, you know exactly with whom you're speaking. It is a tremendous loss to the community overall in congressional districts. She's been a presence for 3 decades plus. That is just in her congressional representation. You have to also couch in the fact that she was a member of city council, and before that, she had run before. So she's been a force in Texas politics and in Houston specifically for a number of years. And the impact of that, really, I don't know that people can articulate it just yet because it is still fresh. It is as fresh as this news today, which kind of knocked that off the cycle. But locally, uh, we're still running stories with regard to what that means for Houston, what that means for Black Houston specifically, because she was the embodiment of stand on business for Black people.
Mhm.
People may, pick at her record with regard to publicly what she was always able to bring forward with her legislative record, but she was one of the authors for the Juneteenth celebration. She is one who's always stood on an examination of reparations for people of African and enslaved descent here in this country, and she's always been unapologetic about it. What I do know about the Congresswoman is that she never missed an opportunity to give voice to the concerns of her constituents. And being a lawyer, having done trial ad and moot court, whenever you were in her presence and she had a microphone, you always felt like she was getting ready to deliver before a tribunal because it was like, and may it please the court. And then she went from there. No cue cards, no nothing. It could be at a small brunch gathering. It could be at a small political gathering. It could be in front of 6,000 people. I've seen her in all of those instances, and she was always able to deliver. So the impact of her loss, I don't think people really understand what that means because she did bring dollars behind the scenes. If there was ever any congressional apportionment, she made sure Houston got its fair share, sometimes having to go past and having language written into that legislation to make sure that dollars flow to Blue Houston because the state has had a record of withholding funding for any number of reasons. This includes disaster funding. She would call people on the carpet about it, but she went and got those dollars. Now, with regard to what is set to happen, Governor Abbott has the authority to call a special election. She did win the primary this past spring. Um, and her term will be up in January. So Abbott has the ability, and they have history in the Houston Chronicle today, where there was a similar situation of a Democrat having had 6 months left in his term, and a month later, a special election was called. The Harris County Democratic Executive Committee has until the 26th of August to name a Democratic candidate to the ballot to replace the Congresswoman. Interestingly enough, you mentioned your soror. You have another member of Alpha Kappa Alpha who ran against her, who was former city council member Amanda Edwards, who actually had a very strong had a very strong showing against the Congresswoman. Now, what does that mean, relatively speaking? The Congresswoman still won by a considerable majority, but former council member Edwards was able to garner numbers larger than any other opponent had. And we're talking about the passing of the torch to a new generation with the Biden situation. It's similar that you have that now, and I don't make any predictions, but if the Democratic uh, Harris County Executive Committee, I'm not in the 18th congressional district. Al Green is my representative. Um, if you had that to happen, I think they would be smart to put Miss Edwards, Attorney Edwards, on the ticket. So Houston will stay blue.
Mhm.
Um, Now, with regards to this other conversation, I guess I'll get in where I fit in because my head is still on swivel, and I'm like, well, what's the plan? But what I do know is what I've heard from both my other co-panelists: follow the money.
Mhm.
Money answereth all things. So that's what the Bible says. So I believe that will be what the answer will be in this situation.
We have a comment
Saying that
here
I would
from
know
one of
Amanda
our.
as well, and I would be really excited for her to be able to be in a position to carry forth Representative Jackson Lee's legacy. I have been nothing but impressed with Amanda, and really sort of in awe of her commitment to community
Mhm.
and her commitment to public service. So I saw her in Dallas at Boulay. So I got a chance to catch up with her and talk with her there. But I do hope that should there be an opportunity for her to be nominated, I would hope that she would rise to the top as the person to be the nominee.
I think she's the smart choice. I think she's the ready choice. There were some things that went on because she was in the mayoral election when the congresswoman was, but she bowed out gracefully and continued to run for the 18th congressional district. So, as things have happened, I just think she's the best position to move forward and take on that seat. But we will see.
Mhm. Okay, I was. Would you bring that comment back up, production assistant? I was saying we had a comment here. Unbelievable news. Currently, Michael Johnson, which we already knew, this thing is illegal for Kamala to run on ticket as president, and Trump and friends calling on President Biden to resign now. The nerve.
It
So,
started
could,
already.
so
Well, just to say one thing, and as people were calling for President Biden to leave, I heard another congressperson. I don't want to say her name because I didn't hear the entire quote. What is the plan? Because that was, and I think having Vice President Harris move up and head the ticket is got to be the plan. One thing I'll say about Republicans is they're disciplined and they're consistent. And we see what the product is on the other side, but they will stand behind it no matter what happens in that situation. But this was not unexpected in my mind that my fellow panelists have said that we're going to have the legal challenges. There
Mhm.
will be somebody in all these jurisdictions who will say this is, and the Republicans will run with the message, this is voter suppression. We didn't vote for her, we voted for the Biden Harris ticket.
Mhm.
She's part of that ticket. So but they will run with that. And as we've seen drug out in all of these other legal proceedings, well, my fear is there will be some injunction imposed that will try to uh, impede the process within local jurisdictions, meaning the states, to move that her ticket forward because these disingenuous, unnecessary, litigious situations, which we're about to see over the next month or so. That's not unexpected. And now they're saying the man should resign immediately. Full disclosure, I was for Joe Biden if he was on life support. So that's just where I am on it. But um, this was not unexpected. And
Right.
now the calls for him to resign. I think his letter said that he was looking towards the future. He's still ready to run and get elected this November, but having listened to the constituency and the donor class, I guess that's out there, he looked at the entire 4 years and could he carry things forward. So these new calls, I would hope that there's been discussion internally. How do we deal with those calls? Because the litigation specifically.
Well, I
so
say to deal with it. I want to say this, and I'm gonna toss it to you. I think you handled it the way Ted Lieu handled it when he stepped up to that microphone and said, I'm calling for the man who is convicted in a civil court of sexual assault, rape, also convicted of defaming that person who he was found guilty of committing a sexual assault against, who also has in a separate court 34 felony counts, also in a separate court proceeding, fraudulent business practices, and no longer can operate business or the charitable foundation in the state of New York, also who is named in the Epstein files. I'm calling for that candidate to drop out the race. That's how you handle that to me. But that's just me. I don't know.
So I just want
You
to
know
put
what's
this.
so interesting about Ted Lieu? He has become a whole different person in Congress than he was when he was in the state legislature. He was always someone who everyone thought very highly of and very favorably of. He's a kind person. He has turned into a beast in Congress. He was really an understated guy, but he has definitely taken on this really sort of like bold, brash persona, and I absolutely live for it.
I was going to say that the legal, first of all, as a lawyer, I always tell people you can sue for anything. It doesn't mean you win, but you could always sue, right? And sometimes there's this misnomer that because they sue, there's this inherent thing. Oh, they must have something substantive to win a case on. And no, that's not the way our legal. It's why we're overly litigious as a society anyway. But I do want to say that there is nothing on the books that would prevent Vice President Harris from being on the ticket, and there's nothing in the 50 in all 52 plus states, that would allow for Harris to actually be on the ticket. So this is all just smoke right now. And yes, I'm sure Republicans will do anything they can to make sure that there are nominees not on the ticket. But it'd be different if there was a convention and then the delegates had already voted, and then President Biden would say, okay, well, it's September, I'm taking myself off. Now you may have a legal process because technically speaking, it's not until the delegates have assigned their vote to a nominee that it can be certified on the ballots. That hasn't happened yet.
Mhm.
And so there's that. And then also there's standing, right? Because the Republicans are going to argue, well, it took away our vote. Where you weren't a registered Democrat anyway, so you weren't voting in the primary. So you're going to have to now find a registered Democrat, who was actually going to say, I never had a chance. And then, that's going to be, I mean, could they find somebody? Sure. I'm sure they can find somebody, but, it's just going to require a lot of legal machinations that it may cloud up some things, but honestly, as someone who actually practices law, nobody gives a shit about what happens in the courtroom because like I can argue about the esoteric values of law, and people do not care. People will not make it. It's just not going to happen. That's not going to be the national conversation, unless Democrats don't take hold of the narrative.
Right.
I will say that because one thing that I always think about was how her emails became such a weird thing that I remember in 2016, I was talking to somebody who was a Democrat, strong Democrat, Black woman, and she says, I don't know about her emails. I was like, what the hell does that even mean? And I said, literally, no, tell me, what does that mean to you, her emails? And then she sat there for 10 minutes and tried to explain to me, and she couldn't even figure out what she was saying. But it became so normalized in our context of how we evaluated a candidate that we couldn't even get past to like who she was running against. So I say all that to say Democrats are now, their challenge was they haven't really done a good job on a national level of honing in on a message and characterizing her as a candidate to be digested to the national audience. And which is why it's important that a lot of people now are jumping behind her, because that's important. Because if we don't start getting behind her at now, we leave the fissure of, some discontent and narratives to be shaped. Republicans don't have a narrative on her right now. I saw one a senior advisor, David Miller, he says, she's against plastic straws, which is not American. So they don't have anything. They're literally grasping at straws right now. So like they're literally trying to figure out a narrative. Before, they were going to run with Biden is old. He can't be in office. Now they have to switch their entire strategy. And I think I saw one person who's a Republican strategist. He quoted a Republican strategist like, Republicans are right now the dog that caught the car.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They were chasing after the car. Now they finally caught it. It's like, oh, wait, I didn't expect the car to stop. And I just say Democrats still need to do their job for them. Let them come up with their own strategy.
So does the narrative change to say that now that Mr. Biden is no longer running, that the other person is now the old person in the race?
Exactly. He is the old person in the race. And so that's and based on everything that I've heard about his convention speech, I think, listen,
his cognitive ability needs to be called into question.
Right.
I tried to watch it, and I couldn't get past him saying that the ear is the place where you bleed the most in the body. I had to stop watching at that point.
Here's what I'm going to say just really quickly about what they're saying is illegal or not legal. Again, this coming from folks who pushed the whole birther narrative, who said that it was illegal for President Obama to run for president. It was illegal for even Ted Cruz at one point to seek the presidency. So this is not a group that I can trust when it comes to what's legal and not legal. And especially as we know that the laws and things are precedent. Let me say that precedent has been changed and shifted when this group, where this group is involved. I have heard, and I'd love to understand, not that it's, I don't think this is a real thing, but I have heard that Joe Manchin is saying he's going to switch back to the Democratic Party so that he can run. Any thoughts, or we just don't even want to give that any?
Okay, so we moving into this potential running mates thing, or
no? She said no.
He wants to run for the time.
He wants to be the nominee.
Yes,
I would say this: there's always that one person that always likes to have the attention. Yes. And then everybody's like, in any group, and even though they're like nobody is paying attention to them, Joe Manchin has about as much chance to be the nominee as I have.
As me.
Right. Nobody's checking for him. Nobody.
So they like, who's trying to see you, Otis?
Yeah. Like,
nobody's checking for him. No.
First of all, you can't deliver West Virginia anyway. You wouldn't even be able to deliver West Virginia.
No.
So like it's just, why are you? As Jocelyn likes to say, why are you here? Why is you here? Like, so he can make a fool of himself at the convention. He can, but it's already, listen, your California delegates are going to get behind Kamala. You have Florida delegates are going to, having text the DEC chair. She says we're fully behind Kamala. So you have Florida delegates. I'm sure you're going to have the New York delegates because both Clintons have already come out in support of Kamala. So that means they already have ties within the New York delegation. They're coming out. And I just want to say this. I actually do believe this was part of the bigger plan. Mm-hmm. For 3 weeks now, I've been hearing, and we talked about this offline, that there was a shifting happening within the party. And I've said it to my friends, and they've said it to me. If I'm not going to mention names, but if party stalwarts are pushing the narrative that Joe should get out, they already have somebody in mind. And it's just all political theater about who's it going to be. These conversations happened a week ago. I would even tell you, I laughed, and I laughed at the statement. This is how I know people. It's all political theater. I was told on Thursday it was going to be Kamala. Mm-hmm. Thursday night, the person who was like, don't repeat it. It's going to be Kamala. And so here's why I laughed at that. Because on the MSNBC news said Vice President Harris was caught off guard, about the announcement today, and she only knew a couple minutes before the president announced. And I'm like, this is just funny to me. They, they have literally had this conversation. If this person told me on Thursday, that means she was pretty damn confident that this conversation had happened. So this thing of like it's playing out in front of us, we may be the last to know, but people have made this the conversation I've had weeks ago. The plan had been laid out. If somebody told me on Thursday it's going to be Kamala and he's going to announce they laid it out. He's going to announce on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I was like, "Are you joking?" And they're like, "No, it's Kamar. It's going to happen on Sunday. Just be ready." And so that's why Dimitri, I'm pretty vocal on social media, but I have said nothing.
Yeah.
I have said nothing in the last 3 weeks because the conversations I've had, this was just what it was.
Right.
And
maybe
the only thing I said is there's a whole lot of folks who are, playing armchair politicos and speculating about what will be or what will not will be. Meanwhile, I will actually be at convention voting. Well, y'all want to watch it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And one thing I'll say to your point, I don't know if you all recall, there was was it a X, what do you call it, a tweet or something that Mark Halperin, who's a former Newsweek, I think, journalist, he put out a story that said that the president would be making the statement today on this Sunday. And to your point, I think after the debate that there were serious discussions going forward. And, I pray for the president's health, but it's interesting that we conveniently had a health scare that had to be dealt with this particular weekend, as some other convenient instances have occurred. But
and he said in his interview with Lester Holt, the only thing, if there was a health situation.
Right. So I would agree that there was a bigger plan. There's too much at stake. There are too many players involved. There's too much from an international geopolitical standpoint for this to have just happened in the last 48 hours. And then we have the come to Jesus after meeting that we've had over the last couple of weeks for this not to have been in play. One of my family members said, well, the reason the president is staying in place is to ensure that the vice president moves into the seat after he either had to step down or if any other situation occurred for him being unable to fulfill the duties of his office. Mm-hmm. So this is just a more a fast forward of the plan that was already in place anyway. I want to say this because I love the discussion. I just hope we as a people can see and get to the place where we are accepting and want to move forward and can see a female woman of color in that seat. And I say all of us, men, women, and others who are voting age to get behind the candidacy. And everyone else, as the other party does, needs to just fall in line. Because to the litigation standpoint, I think it actually works to the benefit of Vice President Harris also, because people voted for her and for President Biden in all of these primaries. To your point, Joe Manchin, and no one's checking for it. Nobody put your name was not on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So, and all of these other considerations, the Pennsylvania governor, God bless him, the governor of Kentucky, God bless him. They may be great.
Who was the one that ran against Biden? What's his name?
Dean Phillips. No, Dean Phillips. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. He actually ran
in the primary process. Yes.
But you just that's a perfect example. You can't even remember his name. But he was.
I do want to say the governor of Pennsylvania came out full-throated endorsement of
Harris. Yes.
Of Harris. So it's all right. So are we going to move into the conversation about Black folks and candidacy, or do you want to talk about the vice presidency? Who's going to be on the ticket?
Well, which one y'all want to talk about first? My sister put up her church finger. Which one you want to talk? Because we got two Black men tonight. I would love to talk about the cognac and cigar.
Let's let that be the dessert. Okay.
Okay.
Let's first deal with the meat and potatoes of the potential running mates.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so
Gavin Newsom, we said is a negative.
No, because you can't have two from the same state.
Gotcha.
can't have so.
Gretchen Whitmer, we talked about in the pre-show, the all-woman ticket.
Nah.
Nah.
It's not.
What about from the state of Arizona, Mark Kelly, the astronaut?
No name ID.
No name ID.
No national profile.
Nope.
Okay.
Honorable man, yes, but he does not have a national profile.
But
Agreed.
a swing state.
I get it, but they don't know him.
And Arizona, respectfully, I think is 6 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, maybe North Carolina. You all the politicos, you all know better than of who we're looking at. Arizona, purple, Christina.
Yeah, I don't see Mark Kelly being that the nominee. Number one, name ID. But then again, honestly, I would say in the vice presidential spot, name ID is really not that big. It's not insignificant, but it's not as significant as to the top of the ticket. What I would look at, who can carry what, and who's going to matter more. And I think, for me, it has to be the governor of California. Carolina, Roy Cooper. I think Cooper, he's a popular governor, twice elected in that state. And he can really speak to, first of all, he's a white male, cisgender white male. So he checks off certain boxes. And
square jaw, crew cut, the right haircut. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that, he fits boxes about he can deliver take a state off the board for Trump, which is a strategic, a great strategy for me. That means Republicans are going to have to, what that means, they're going to have to pour more money into North Carolina, in order to make it sure it's not going to go blue. And that divides attention and resources, right? And so I think you can parlay that. I know I've heard some statements of Andy Beshear in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Why I don't think he can deliver Kentucky, but there is a thing he can maybe make some inroads in the Midwest, in Ohio, and in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where you're going to have strong surrogates in Glenn Whitmer. She's going to have to really, put her on her big girl, boots or her fancy leather jackets and really push out that vote. So I don't know if I really would go with Andy. So my thing is, like I said, Andy would be my second choice, but it really is the North Carolina governor.
Okay, Roy Cooper of North Carolina. That's who you say. What say you, Patrice?
Preference for governors, because I think that we need to hold everybody that we can in the Senate right now. I don't want to lose any margin in the Senate. We need to be trying to pick up in the Senate versus trying to pull people out of the Senate. So that's my kind of personal opinion there. So I certainly think that Kamara has made valid points about Roy Cooper. I don't know that Andy Beshear is going to be able to deliver in a significant way. He will be somebody that could be fun to talk trash about J.D. Vance, though.
Mm-hmm.
And to sort of refute his quote-unquote hillbilly bona fides.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about you, Donald? Who say you? And then I'll toss it to you, sister. Any thoughts?
I'll agree with Patrice and Kamara, the names they put out. I don't know what your thoughts about the Pennsylvania governor, because his name, I'm just looking I'm looking at what's on CNN and MSNBC, what everything everyone else is looking at, but you all may have more insight. I didn't think about Roy Cooper, but I said in my thought this morning, it's 6 states and North Carolina was one of them. So to the degree that Cooper can pull that state across the board and exert resources that would otherwise be used, whoever's on the ticket is inconsequential. She can put a potato.
The reason I don't think you need Shapiro is because Biden has great relationships in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So I think you can have the president can campaign
and he's got right on the train up there.
And they know him, so
right.
I don't think you need to double back and get the same type of person that's going to deliver a state that is already in play for you. I think you go after the state that was, lips was not red, but like was pinkish, right?
Mhm.
And you make that now a playable state on the board, and you make Republicans fret of like, man, like now they're looking at the board because they actually, what people don't realize, Republicans have a slim margin
After victory.
to get this slim path to victory, and they're going to have to knock off Georgia, and they're going to have to take away Michigan for us.
Mhm.
Right.
And so if we nail that, I still feel like we hold Wisconsin. I feel because Wisconsin has trended blue even prior to 2020. I called Wisconsin because I paid attention to the way they're how they voted in the state Supreme Court in 2018. And I said how they changed over the state Supreme Court. I said, oh, Wisconsin's blue now. So when it went blue in 2020, it didn't shock me. Arizona, I was kind of I didn't know, but I did see how a lot of the groundwork was happening again in 2018, and so it didn't shock me. Georgia shocked me. I'm not going to hold you. Georgia shocked me. I don't know if we'll get Georgia again.
That's a toss-up.
That's still a toss-up. So the fact that Georgia is a toss-up, I feel like you need another Southern state.
And North Carolina was what made the difference for Obama. And it hasn't been in place since Obama.
It hasn't been in place since Obama. And guess what? Now that you make Roy Cooper you make him the vice presidential candidate, not only is it in play for Obama, but now again, if we lose Georgia and we win Carolina,
we still good.
We're still good. Like we have diminished the chances. If North Carolina goes on November 5th, because we'll get the results early on in that night. Republicans are going to be shitting bricks.
Right.
They're cooked.
Like that is going to be they can call the presidency at that point. They might be able to call the presidency. Like she might have Vice President Harris or President Harris would have like a 70% chance of winning the presidency if North Carolina falls.
But what about the age factor? I want to ask this question because Roy Cooper is the oldest. So when we think about the longevity, the ticket, because J.D. Vance is of 39 years of age. So, but Roy Cooper is 67. Bashir of Kentucky is 48. Shapiro is 51. So does that age factor play in this? Okay, go ahead. Y'all saying no.
I think to what they're saying, what you need is a known quantity. I shouldn't have said a potato. For that, the vice presidential person normally doesn't, I think, make the deciding factor because they've even talked about that with Vance and what he does, but it could hurt. So I think what you need is a known quantity that's going to add to the win pros for Vice President Harris versus maybe a younger candidate that's still going to be more of a toss up and chance. So some of the names that are there, that's there. If she would have put Joe Manchin on it, that would be a shocker. So that we don't want any. Again, people's head are on swivel enough. I think the names that have been talked about here, I would expect one of those to rise to the top of the list.
What about our boy who was the Republican? Adam Kinzinger to do a unity ticket.
No.
I
don't want any Republican person.
Questions for the people.
I'm sorry, because these are people who don't even believe in the platform of the Democratic Party. Why would we put them on their ticket? They would never, ever, ever, ever consider putting any one of us on their ticket. Why would we have to be the people that are quote doing the bigger work?
But it's been talked about before in the past.
And it's
to your point, is Kinzinger, is Cheney, are any of them going to come out and endorse Vice President Harris? That is what will be interesting to see. Because they say that they want to stop Trump at all costs for the sake of democracy. Well, here's your opportunity.
Well, there was a bunch of people who showed up to the Republican convention who said at one point they wanted to stop Trump too. According to his vice president, at one point he was a never Trumper. So it's obviously it doesn't matter what people say. A lot of stuff till it's time to put up.
I'm gonna throw something out there. The reason I thought Trump would lose in 2020 was a number of different factors, but just I consider myself a white peopleologist, and
is that your black child?
That's my black job. Yeah. And I would say, one thing I would tell people in 2020, I said, the reason why I don't believe Trump gets another shot at the seat, this was 2020, because I said white people are exhausted. They were exhausted from his presidency. And one thing that what I know about centrist white people is that, they don't like to be embarrassed. They don't like loud. They don't like, they don't, they don't like bringing attention. This stuff, like when somebody is loud and obnoxious, it makes them cringe, And so what he was doing in office, just off of, again, I had no numbers to prove this. It's just based off of what I just know about white people. When he was doing the things, his antics in office, I'd be like, he's losing votes. He's losing votes because ideally, for most people, the presidency doesn't really matter to them. Most centrist people, the presidency, they just like this. The presidency is a central figure of stability. And when somebody is showing instability in a space that they think should be representative of American democracy and American capitalism and American ideals, it makes them uncomfortable. So what I would tell people who say, I don't know if Kamala can actually do it, I'm like, you don't really know how white people really think. Because white people, they will vote for Harris if she can show she's presidential. This is why it's important about messaging and how they in the next few weeks, how they characterize her. Because messaging is going to be important in how they characterize and sell her to the people. And there's two reasons why I say this. One, there's already a PAC who was dedicated to Nikki Haley has come out and said we're supporting Kamala Harris. A PAC that was dedicated to Nikki Haley has come out and said we're supporting it, which goes along with my white peopleologist theory. Like, it's just not, it really is about the idea of stability and presidential. And this has nothing to do with nothing, but it kind of ties into me in my mind, it ties in my mind. In 2018, I was one of the early supporters of Andrew Gillum. I threw his first fundraiser in Central Florida. Literally, that's on record. When nobody else believed in Andrew, I said he's going to be the nominee. I supported Andrew, and when he shocked the world and became the Democratic nominee for governor for Florida, all of a sudden, the people who helped him build his grassroots campaign were pushed to the side because the party jumped in. Now, here's the reason why this story is important. He had his apparatus was so unknown that you literally had, I remember I was at the Citrus Club here in Florida, I was at the Citrus Club having lunch, and I kept getting a call from a 202 number. And I was like, who keeps calling me from 202? This is the day after Andrew wins. And I was like, who keeps calling? So then I just kept ignoring the number because I'm like, I don't like picking up, especially during lunch, I'm in a meeting. Then someone calls me again. A friend of mine calls me, hey, Kamara, can you pick up this phone? I was like, why? He says, the former Attorney General Eric, what's his name?
Holder.
Eric Holder. His office has been trying to call you. I was like, why is Eric Holder's office trying to call me? Well, the Democratic Party, they don't have Andrew Gillum's phone number, and you were one of the most notable people who was supporting him. So they're trying to get in touch with him because nobody knows how to get in touch with his campaign. That's how off the grid Andrew was, right? Now, here's the problem. What happened? Then the party came in and they ran Andrew, and they ran him as Obama light. And I said to them, you are making a big mistake on how you're running it. That's not how Andrew won the grassroots. He won as a grassroots candidate, and you're running him as if he's a national candidate. And this is what they literally told me, Kamara, you don't know what you're talking about. He's a national candidate. And they started putting him on The View. They started putting him on all this other stuff. And I'm like, you are alienating him from the people who brought his candidacy up. Right. And
that is how Black candidates lose, because white consultants don't understand Black people. They don't understand Black candidates. They don't understand how we show up. They don't understand how we talk to people, how we message people, and how we have an ability to communicate across different audiences, and they try to modify that for their comfort level and not for what resonates with the person authentically. And then we lose. They collect their money, they go buy a yacht, and then somebody else hires them to win another campaign, whether they win or lose.
But
And Patrice just answered your question.
Hold on, let me just say, can I just say to your point, Patrice, to that point, literally to that point, you know when I knew Andrew was going to lose? When I knew Andrew was going to lose, they did a rap concert for Andrew Gillum the night before the election. And I said to them, I called them up and I said, what the hell are you guys doing? This is how, and he said, Kamara, this is how we're going to get black voters to buy into Andrew Gillum. We're going to have all these rappers on the stage. But here's the problem. I said, you don't understand what's happening. And to go back to my point of white voters, this is how I'm going to land the plane. Black people are going to vote for Andrew. You don't have to worry about that. He had the HBCU vote on lock. We got him. It's white people you have to convince to vote for Andrew. And if white people are looking at this man throw a rap concert the night before the damn election, who were on the fence about whether or not they're going to buy into, because he has to look like the governor. He has to look like the governor to them. And if they're like on the fence and they're going to go into the voting booth tomorrow and be like, this guy threw a damn concert with all these profanity-ridden concert.
What's going to happen in the governor's mansion?
What's going to happen? And guess how much he lost the governorship by? 33,000 votes. Mm-hmm. And you cannot convince me that there were 33,000 white people who looked at that and be like, yeah, now I'm good.
and let me just say, I know Christina, your question with Patrice and Kamara just brought up with regard to black men, getting people who can message and not pander.
Yes.
That is what I hear in the literal barbershop, because I've done, voter registration, civic engagement in barbershops to specifically engage black men. And they're not impressed with you putting Amber Rose up on the stage. They're not impressed with a concert. They want to know numbers and facts and get a full understanding of what has she done for me today. And these are people who have records.
In California, let's say that.
Right. But I know people who have records who are willing to move past that. They want to know, what has she done now? So if we, to your point, have people who can successfully communicate her message, her platform, her record, her real record, and not pander and not make her seem as though she's pandering to black men, she can win more of the black vote. And that 20% mythical percentage that has come out of somewhere, I don't do the behind the scenes statistics about that. It won't come to fruition, but that's what needs to happen.
I want you guys to do? I want you guys to, if you haven't watched this, there's an interview she does with Rich Paul. She did this several months ago. Rich Paul is LeBron's one of his confidants and business partners, and she does this interview with him. Is it Rich Paul? I believe. I think it's Rich. Anyway, it is such a good interview, and there's a portion of it that I loved. She talks about finances and black men and what they're looking for, and it is such an intuitive conversation. And what I would love, and you're, Donald, you're a lawyer, so you know this. I love when people discount me and my arguments. I love it because what that tells me? That means I have room to impress. So I don't look at people who are like, oh man, how's she gonna appeal to the black men? I'm like, listen, if you get her in the room and you get her with the right conversation, she is going to draw people in. And then and it's like, really pull up that conversation. It's with Spring Hill. I don't know if it's with Rich Paul, but it's what not Rich Paul, but the other guy that does a lot of LeBron's podcasts on the barbershop. But if you get that Kamala, which I know you can, people are going to see that and then that's going to be, they're going to be like, you know what? I called her Cop Kamala, but I like the way she talks. And how black men think about politics, what people don't realize. Black men, and this is me, because I still go to the barbershop. I know I'm bald, but there's a reason why I still go. There's a reason why I still go to talk to black men. I don't go because I can cut my own hair, but I talk because I try to understand, like, what do black men think. And every time it comes down to finances. what people don't realize about black
Yes,
men think about finances first.
absolutely.
That is their main objective. And so if you're not talking to them about the financial capabilities of your candidacy or how that's going to help me, you've lost them. And you can't go to them in an inauthentic way about, I like the same music you listen to.
Oh, could care less.
Could care less.
But she has a degree in economics. Why do we not hear that side of her more?
Well, I think you're going to.
You answered your own question earlier. It's who are the consultants that are presenting her message, and who can really push through. Because Kamara said, I heard it a couple of weeks ago in the barbershop. They want to know. Black men are pragmatists, like any other Midwestern WASP person that we talk about out there. They are pragmatists and want to know, how is she going to hit my bottom line? And you have to bring into reflection how the Biden Harris ticket has impacted bottom line, and whether student loan forgiveness, that's impacted some HBCU graduates. That's not everybody within the black male population. So what else has she done? What else has she offered? And people have to show those practical components about what they have done, as opposed, again, to don't pander, because then we'll shut down in a hot second behind that.
Yeah, and she does her finance degree. Is going to play a big factor because she can really lean into that, right? She can talk about the aspects of investment within the black community, in particular with Maverick Carter. That's who it is.
Mhm.
It's Maverick Carter. That is, and maybe I should put that link in. It was a month ago.
Yeah, let us post it.
Pardon?
Let us all post it.
Yeah.
Our production assistant, can you research that and drop it in our comments? An interview with Maverick Carter, and drop it in the comments.
It's a 21-minute interview, and in that space, within that 21-minute, I forget where, if you can timestamp, but she talks for 2-3 minutes about black men and investment and how important it is to invest in the community and how black men think with their pockets. And I was like, this is exactly the type of message that is going to cut through the narrative of she doesn't care, but she doesn't like about black men. Let me be quite honest here.
So no more going on Charlamagne's show?
No.
She's going to have to, because you know why she's going to have to? She's going to have to go on the Charlamagne show because Charlamagne is got some media. He's a media. What's the?
I'd rather her go talk to guys on Instagram Live than to talk to Charlamagne, but that's just me.
But Charlamagne, maybe we're not gonna see her on Club Shay Shay though, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
I'm just asking.
But okay, here's the thing though. I don't like Charlamagne. I think he's a media op, but he's a necessary
tool,
necessary platform almost, because unfortunately there are people who still listen to the Breakfast Club. I don't think they're as big as they once were, but they have some form of media relevancy, right? And so there's that, right? And so and even someone like Shannon Sharp, he has some form of media relevancy. So I think these are necessary platform, necessary evils that you're going to have to maybe go to, because honestly, black media hasn't been given the full gamut of accessibility to politics, and so they only pick 2 or 3 people that have this type of access, and unfortunately, these 2 or 3 people tend to be the most ignorant of the bunch, as far as the not well read, not well researched, and but they're given opportunities to interview potential candidates.
Well, I do have a question about this conversation about finances, because it seems to me that, look, I don't necessarily believe the numbers that have been quoted, but we do know that between black men and women, black men, their support for Trump had increased over the last few years. We talk about money mattering, but yet the Biden Harris administration can point to actual increases in our bottom line, and yet somehow that didn't seem to resonate with Black men. Black men were still saying, and obviously, again, I know it's not all, but there were a plethora of Black men still saying, yeah, but we were better off under Trump. And I'm just trying to figure out if they were looking at their actual 401k. If you're talking about eggs in the grocery store, then yes, I get it. Inflation has increased. But if you're talking about your 401k or other investments, then it seems like they would have been squarely in the Biden-Harris corner in the first place. So why was that the case, that they weren't, that message of economics wasn't resonating with them?
I would say it's because it wasn't given the big megaphone of attention. And sometimes, a lie don't care who you tell it. You know what I mean? So it don't care who you tell it. A lie is a lie, right? And sometimes the lies, it can soak in your ear like honey, and sometimes the truth can dip in your ear like vinegar, right? And it's like, sometimes I don't want to hear the truth. I don't want to hear why my life is not the way it's supposed to be. So guess what? I'm going to project my problems onto some other entity that has no real value or contribution to my life. But here's why I think it's gonna be different now than it was in the past. So there's a statement I've heard like, well, in 2020, Kamala didn't really register with voters, and that's why she had to get kicked out the primary, or she stopped in the primary. But I also say timing in politics is everything. Timing means everything, and it wasn't the right time for Kamala to be introduced to the voters on a national scale. 4 years is a long time. Now people can have gotten used to her in a serious vice presidential role, and therefore the conversations around her and what she thinks and how it's conversations of finances and Trump and all that. These conversations now can take hold in a different space. So timing is important. I think if you re-deliver the message, right, in the right time, it catches on. Donald, your turn. You've been in trial. If I have an incredible statement or incredible argument, I'm not going to put that at the beginning of the trial, because I'm going to hold that, because guess what? If I deliver that in my opening, a lot of things happen in trial, and then now it's like, oh, I've totally forgot about that hammer. But if I have a hammer of a statement, a hammer of a line, a hammer of argument, I'm going to wait till I have the jury's attention. I have their attention. Now I'm going to go ahead and deliver. I've been sitting on this thing for a while. Same thing when you're in a hearing with the judge. There's a case that I'm waiting to put. I'm not going to argue this case and begin to indicate. I'm going to let opposing counsel argue all their cases. And then guess what? Now the judge is kind of like, they're kind of perked up in their seat. And I said, well, Your Honor, here's why this case actually matters. And it takes precedence over all these other cases that have been mentioned. Right? Now the judge is like, wait a minute, I have your attention. The argument has to matter at the right time. Kamala can make that argument about Black men, finances, can make the argument against Trump, who has this people have this weird thought about, oh, he's increased my finances, or he's helped, my bottom line. That argument can be had on a national level now with somebody who can prove it based on the numbers from the Biden economy, right? One of the things we talked about why Biden was having a problem, because in the debate, if you think about it, you peel back all the extracurricular, he was actually making a lot of sense. His delivery is bad because he was not quick enough, but what he was saying was right.
And he answered a question.
And he answered the question, but guess what?
Trump did not.
People didn't hear that. All they saw was and they just couldn't get past the aesthetic of the conversation. That's going to change now, and that's what scares Trump, because now Kamala, when she's focused, she can deliver a great message, and Trump can't compete against that.
Well, my hope is that the other hammer that comes down is, again, they keep talking about her record when it came to Black males and incarceration. Well, I hope that someone talks to, because despite my feelings for Dr. Umar, he was on the Breakfast Club the other day explaining that 11 Black people were executed as a result of Donald Trump. And 2 of those people were actually thought to have been innocent. So it's my hope that when they start hammering on who criminalizes Black people, or who has criminalized Black people, what happened to the Central Park 5, or now the exonerated 5, I hope those kind of arguments she's able to hammer home those arguments.
Yeah, we have a question. Monique Scepter Green has put a question in there. Well, first, it says, do you all think when she earns and wins the nomination, because right now she is just endorsed and hasn't gotten nominated, more Blacks will vote? Do you think our turnout would increase? Because we're from the state of Louisiana, and had it been for a few Black people just going to vote, they wouldn't have the debacle of the governor that they have right now, right? And so from a just turnout perspective and increasing the numbers, will we see an Obama-like turnout among Black voters?
You won't see an Obama-like turnout. But I do want to. You'll see growth. You'll see growth in enthusiasm and turnout.
There'll be more energy than there is now, I think.
Right. I think it, but I want to make sure we're on the same page here too. The misnomer that Black people are going to really make a difference in selection.
Pull it home.
Yes and no. At the end of the day, you're going to need a coalition of voters that is just not. Black women are the strongest base in the party, right? Unquestioned. They were probably there, and I think for Obama they voted at 94%, right, which is the highest. And then for Biden it was like at 93 or something to that effect. But 94%, 93%. Let's just say it's at 94% now for the same thing. It doesn't drop off. And I think for Biden, Black men were at 81%, almost 20%, 19% down, 19%. For Obama, they're at 90%. They came down to 81%. Let's say Trump gets them at 70, it now picks up another 5%. Let's just say he picks up another 5%, 75%, but Black women hold at 94%. The thing is, even at 75%, they are still the strongest voting bloc of the Democratic Party. So what does that tell you? Incrementally, the most important bloc to really make sure you're keeping your numbers are going to be white women, right, and white men. And this is why the vice presidential pick is so important. Yes, we want Black men to be in the high 80s, even to the 90s to vote for Kamala. I can see her getting in the 80s. I can also see Trump getting 75, but that's not going to win or lose elections for me. What's going to win or lose elections, because ultimately speaking, even if you balance out those numbers, 94% to 80s, 90, you're still looking at an 87, 88% turnout for Black people cumulative for a candidate. What you really need to make sure, you need to bring down the 53% white women for Trump and the 58% of white men who are voting for Trump. If you can chip away at those numbers, if you could bring it down to 51 for white women, if you could bring it down to 55 for white men, that's where you win, because they're still the majority. And it still matters in states of North Carolina. It still matters in states in the Midwest, right? Florida's off the chopping. We're not competing, for
Texas
this
either.
Yeah.
Although I do think Texas in 10 years
was also where Vice President Harris is going to have a tremendous advantage. She connects with young people, young voters, and kind of young activists in a way that folks, I think, really take for granted. I think that she's going to really be able to energize young voters, the kind of 18 to 35 demographic. I think across all races and ethnicities and segments, I think she's going to really be able to energize that voting bloc to turn out. They're not necessarily always consistent and reliable voters, but I think that they will show up for her because I think that she's going to get them to believe in and something to be able to look forward to in terms of their future and the issues that are of importance to them, the issues that resonate with them, and she's going to have a lot of shared values in terms of where their priorities are.
Mm-hmm. So we had a comment here saying the running mate will probably come from a swing state. So we were talking about that earlier. We got another comment here was talking about maybe the Roland Martin show. Is that a platform that would have some resonance? I listen to a lot of Urban View on Sirius XM. I'm trying to think of where do we need to penetrate? Because the truth is, I think a lot of the penetration has to come from Donald and when you at the barbershop, for Black males. Now, as a white peopleologist, where do we chip
Republicans have spent tremendous money on YouTube because Black men are over indexers of YouTube. So they are like flooding YouTube with their advertising. With
Club Shay Shay might be the space.
It could be, but just overall social media blanketing, as Patrice is saying, reach people quickly. That's where a lot of your dollars are going to go. I would hope.
Okay.
Except for traditional white consultants are going to tell you that you need to spend your money on TV. That's how they get paid.
So what this also makes a difference too, and I think we talk about white consultants. It's really going to be important who her team is. A lot of times, they don't have connectors within the Black community. They don't know who to speak to. They don't know. It's funny. So
genuine, authentic connectors. That's what you all said.
I was in 2016. Hillary was running, and I was sitting there in a small room with President Clinton. It was me and like several other Black people, like let's say a room of 10 people. And I chuckled to myself because I was talking, they were asking my opinions on like how to connect with like Central Florida. And I said, well, you really got to like delve into the Divine Nine, right? You really, it's in the South. They are the backbone of the voting base in Central, in not only just in Florida, but in the South, right? And so I said that because for every Divine Nine member, they have a network of 20 to 100 people that listen to them about who's going to vote, who they should vote for. And so I'm saying this, and he's
2.5 million Divine Nine members.
Pardon?
And multiply that by 2.5 million Divine Nine members.
Right. So I said, they are the literally one of the backbones of like of the Black voting community, especially higher educated Black voting community. So I'm saying this, and this is what made me laugh. And President Clinton says,
"What is the Divine Nine?"
He said, "Divine Nine. I've never heard that term before. What is that?" And I said to myself, I didn't say it in the meeting because I didn't want to embarrass him. I was like, Negro, weren't you like inducted as
honorary Sigma?
Weren't you
yes.
Weren't you like an named as an honorary Sigma? Like,
yes.
what do you mean you don't know what the Divine Nine is? But I say that
he knows
because it shows
our Sigma brother is on the line here, so let's.
It's a whole other conversation.
Listen, I love Sigmas.
We're not
and so I'm sitting there like, you're a Sigma. So you don't know what a Divine Nine is. That just shows me that's not real connectors for people in the party. So you're not going to have to worry about that with Kamala.
We have another comment here. Question: could a Mitch Landrieu like running mate bring the white male voters over? Patrice, I'm gonna toss that to you first. I know you're not a white peopleologist, but
But I am an astute observer.
Yes.
I am not sold that Mitch Landrieu is popular enough with white people to be able to move white folks as a voting bloc. I think people have a lovely relationship with him.
Yes, especially after removing all them Confederate monuments in New Orleans, right?
And unfortunately, after all this stuff that has been coming out of recent about his father's administration and the number of Black exonerees out of Louisiana, you know, unfortunately, people do get judged by the sins of the father. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Okay. All right. Well, guys, we have gone a little bit over what our normal time is, and I am perfectly fine with that because I think that the conversation calls for it. And sister, I didn't know if you want to ask a specific question or if you just we want to do our normal round robin and
well, I did want to do a round robin, just throwing out some other potential running mates, and y'all just say yay, nay, whatever. Hakeem Jeffries. In an ideal world, guys.
No.
Beto
O'Rourke. Only because Hakeem has been gunning for
where he is.
Yeah, we need him to stay where he is, and he's been gunning for the House seat. And let's just be quite honest. Why would I want to give up the power of being a House chair to be a vice president?
Absolutely.
That's a more powerful seat.
In the line of succession too.
Yeah.
More powerful seat with no term limit.
Okay. Beto O'Rourke. I know he's
no. I'm from Texas. No.
What about either of the Castro brothers from Texas?
No. And I don't like them, but no.
Okay, cool. That's what I had. Go ahead, Dimitri.
No, and no is what they said. How about that?
So Roy sounds like it's gonna be Harris Cooper.
And all of those that you just named will be great surrogates for the vice president. They would be, I think Mitch Landrieu would do a great job of whispering to certain audiences, but on the ticket, no. And Beto, no. He could be a great whisperer to those who may have had issues with you were talking about the college age demographic, how quickly the news cycle changes and how certain international events had people crying and saying, "Oh, I'll never vote for." Oh, you'll take Trump over someone who's trying to bring about a solution versus someone else who said he's just going to get behind Netanyahu and just blow it off. Okay, we'll see how that goes in November.
I just don't think people understand that if we put ourselves at risk of a Trump presidency again, there will not be another election because they will have to pry his off. He will have to be pried out of his cold, dead body, and he's gonna try to pass it to his kids, they kids, and essentially he's gonna create a monarchy within what used to be our democracy.
I agree because the RNC is not the RNC that we grew up with. It is, and they were very proud to display that and say that this is MAGA world now. And so you don't have, it's amazing to sit back and think that George H.W. and George W. seem a lot more moderate now compared to what you saw on display last week. I mean, my God.
Absolutely.
Well, what we saw on display last week, I don't know, again, I'm going to throw my pitch in for the movie Idiocracy, and this is going to be my closing statement, and then I'm going to toss it to each of you, and then Christina will have the final word. If you have not watched the movie Idiocracy, it is one of the best movies out there. But it also reminds us how easily, if we don't pay attention, we can find ourselves being, quote unquote, I'm using the air quote, ruled, led by some useful idiots. We already did that once. We don't need to do it again. If you put the image from Idiocracy where Terry Crews plays the role of president and that picture of Hulk Hogan up next to each other, you're going to see some glaring similarities. If you watch the movie in total and see how something like, and I've been playing jokes all night, but how people actually did put this on their ear in the audience, in the crowd. You see how easily the theater, the theatrics, the propaganda spreads. And while they try to co-opt what it means to stay woke, don't you forget what it means to stay woke. And you need to be awoke, you need to be aware, and you need to know that your living freely is at risk, because they've already chipped away at it at these state levels. Those of us in Florida and Texas, a lot of our rights have been eroded. If you go and just read what your legislature passed just this last year, when we say if everybody has a gun, then everybody is a target, who are you really targeting? So all I want to say is watch that movie, pay attention to your local elections, pay attention to your congressional elections, your senatorial elections, your city council elections, your school board elections, because there have been some things that have shifted that if we don't put a halt to them now, we will not recognize this country we're living in and how we're having to move and maneuver in this country that we're living in 4 years. So that's what I have to say. Who wants to take that mantle next? Cameron, you want to go give your closing salvo?
I'll say this. I believe we are in a time of our country and this world where everybody is it's especially heightened with information, and so no one should be afraid of being in a new era of communication, in a new era of expansiveness in our government, a new era of politics. And this is just a new way of operating that we've lived in unprecedented times. Once Trump became president, this became an unprecedented a political sphere. And so because everything's been unprecedented, it only makes sense that we, follow the unprecedented with an unprecedented nomination of a Black woman to the candidacy. And I believe this convention is going to be, it's actually going to be a blessing for the Democratic Party, because what we just watched with the Republican convention is that they didn't take anything serious. They didn't take it serious enough. And they had their presidential nominee introduced by a wrestler ripping off his shirt. So I'm excited now to see what this convention, the Democratic convention, is going to be like, because what America is going to tune in, and they're going to see how we take government serious. And I'm telling you, this is how, as being a white peopleologist, people are going to be like, you know what? I'm backing this because they're taking this seriously. And that was such a fumble by the Republicans, because we were understandably shaky. We didn't even know what was going to happen with our likely presidential nominee. We didn't know what was going to happen, how it was going to turn out. And they took that moment when they had a convention and made a complete mockery of everything. Instead of, even Trump in his speech couldn't stay on the rails, and he just went off rails. And I thought to myself, yeah, he blew it. He fumbled it. You fumbled it. Now Democrats have the opportunity to gain the attention back, as far as those who were like, I wasn't sure. And I feel like they're gonna pull it off. And this can set up for a better convention for Democrats. Okay, that's my prediction. And I do believe, if anybody's telling you that Kamala cannot win, then they're not paying attention. And they have, first of all, nobody can predict, but they don't understand what's really happening around this world, around this country. And not only can Kamala win, I'm going to call it here on July 21st at 9:34 p.m. in Florida, Eastern Standard Time, Kamala is going to win the presidency. I fully believe it.
All right. Well, since she's going to be at that convention and she has on her Kamala shirt, Sister Patrice, what say you?
So I'm getting all of my Kamala shirts ready for convention week. But I think that Kamala is spot on. You are going to see decorum. You're going to see the value of good governance. You will also see a representation of every segment of the United States of America in the room at convention. The Democratic Party goes out of its way to make sure that its delegates are representative of all segments, age, demographic, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If there is an audience represented, they have delegates who represent all of those audiences. So you will have all of those voices in the room to vote on behalf of the American people. I also want to just elevate Demetria's point about the value of local elections. Local elections are what drive the quality of life for people every single day. When your lights don't come on, when the trash is not picked up, when the water doesn't run, you do not call 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It is our hope that you know who your council member is to call. It is our hope that you know who your school board member is to call, so that when you have questions about curriculum, when you have questions about the reading list in your child's school, and know that we are working hard to ensure that there are no bans on books, and that our students are being taught full, complete, accurate American history in its entirety and in its totality, without sanitation, without asterisks, footnotes, or other sorts of revisions. It is important who you elect to those positions. And it may not be for you as an individual to run for public office, but I implore all of you to support someone who shares your values, who is running for public office. Encourage somebody that you know who would be a good public servant to run. It is not easy, but it is immensely valuable. It is the honor of my life, absolutely, to serve my community in this way. And I think it's also important for us to be able to make sure that we are creating space for young people to see themselves in the future of governance, the future of leadership, and the world that we're really creating and shaping for them in terms of our policy making.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
finally, I also want to say that we know that if Black people are not in the room at the table, our issues are very often overlooked. So for every opportunity that we have to be in the room, it is incumbent of us to be unapologetic about elevating the needs, issues, and priorities of Black people. Because when Black people win, by default, everyone else is going to win. Mm-hmm. Everyone else has always been able to advance on behalf of our struggle, on behalf of our fight, and at the benefit of our investment in driving social change, driving social movements, driving political movements. So it's incumbent upon us to be bold and unapologetic about fighting for centering the priorities and centering the voices of Black people in this election, in this policy conversation, and in all of the decision-making opportunities that we have to be a part of in the future. Mm-hmm. And with that, I'll be doing my Black job, and that's standing up for my community, voting at convention, and ensuring that that we do have a Kamala Harris as president, so that our country continues to move forward.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Naylor over there in Texas, who was definitely impacted by elections having consequences when Barrow went on through and y'all were without power for some people. Just got power restored last week.
About 2,000 people still don't have it, so they say it could be. So thank you for having me. It's been an honor to be on this panel with these great colleagues. I will say, would you just say elections have consequences? Elections matter. That's all what we're saying. Um, what we have said. We will see what goes forward, and I think that the Democratic Convention coming and having time to message and articulate an authentic, genuine message uh, on behalf of the party, I think is a great thing. Not to get back into the whole legal standpoint, but elections have consequences because we saw a 50-year precedent, regardless of your thoughts on choice and the ability. The Roe versus Wade decision was not just about choice. They are coming against a concept known as fundamental rights and whether they are recognized in the Constitution if it's not explicitly stated. And thank God we have Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who says we had other framers in the Constitution also, those who created 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment right after the Civil War, specifically, as Patrice says, to Black people and what was supposed to have been done. And if you read the hearings about what they were trying to create with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, they were expanding, those framers were expanding the scope of the Constitution past of what those who had done so in 1789. So if you have a court in place that's been appointed by someone who has no respect for that history, has no respect for precedent, has no respect for the stare decisis, that is the ultimate threat against the future of the republic that we need to press to people, because it's not just going to be about the choice issue. That was, I tell people, the 50-year plan. The 150-year plan, I think, has much more impacts on where we are as a people. And we can talk about how do we end up here? We'll never have slavery again. We said we'd never go back to not having abortion.
Mm.
So
Okay.
I don't, not to scare people, but elections have consequences and elections matter. And yes, please go out and vote for your local dog catcher, your local precinct chair, whatever. All of those people matter in your day-to-day life. Definitely what happens in Pennsylvania Avenue matters. I fully was put my support behind the Harris ticket and whoever else is on there. As I'm looking at CNN and they're saying that she's had a discussion with Governor Cooper and he's put his support behind her. They didn't. I'm just seeing all this, and they say all 50 state Democratic chairs are throwing their support behind Harris. So we'll see what happens. But I always say watch, fight, and pray, and we can do this.
Absolutely. Well, you made this point about the in those local elections and them having consequences. Um, and there is something called slavery by another name. So people do balk whether or not we could have slavery again, but we already have slavery by another name, and it's in our prison system. And if you read about Project 2025 and about the expansion of what that prison system might be, and also follow the money, who runs those private prisons and who gets those contracts. Well, I just said it, but who is over indexed as being incarcerated? I mean, you just gotta, they used to have those puzzles where you went 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, connecting the dots. I mean, all you got to do is start connecting a few dots, and it's real simple. That yes, we could have slavery again. It's called the penal system. Sister, close us out for the night.
All right. Well, I would just say first, thank you all very much for joining us here on Hey Sister. I know we ask at the last minute, but hey, we are making history every day. So new things are popping up. What I would say is, look, this is what I think the GOP feared for a long time. That's why the age conversation kept coming up. So now we've taken the age conversation off the table. So it's our time to absolutely mobilize. We started this conversation saying there's 468 seats in Congress, 33 Senate seats, 435 House seats that are up. It's not going to be enough for us to get Kamala Harris into the presidency if she doesn't have a Senate and House of Representatives to support her. I'll take from some of the things that Elizabeth Warren said when she was on The View. Number one, we need to reinstate Roe v. Wade. Number two, we need to pass the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. And then I would add that if, I just glanced on Facebook, folks I'm voting for convicted felon shirts. Well, if we're voting for convicted felons, then that means the voting rights of all convicted felons need to be restored. And last but not least, we still have not passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and that still needs to be something. If it's not named after George Floyd, it's fine, but we do need to still talk about policing in this country. So those are my thoughts.
I would add reparations to that list too.
Well, hello, somebody.
And rest in peace, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on that, right? Amen. Hallelujah. We done came full circle, haven't we? Full circle.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank everybody. It was a longer show than usual, but hey, if you can watch CNN and MSNBC and tune into that, then you can like, follow, share, and subscribe this. If you learned something today, share the link of this conversation with someone who you think would benefit from just listening. They could put it while they're driving in their car and riding around. Listen to this conversation because we're giving you the real grassroots conversation. Right? Not the punditry, not the people who you see on TV, not the paid operatives, but we're giving you real grassroots, and the grassroots is what's going to make all the difference. So we thank you for tuning in. Those of you who are regular viewers, look, say hey, sister. And if you're new to the Hey Sister family, come back and join us again. Good night.
Good night.